Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with animation veteran and the supervising animator for Dean from the Iron Giant, Mr. Chris Sauve. During this chat we talk about the Iron Giant, man. It's a big part of my life, in my opinion. Greatest animated movie of all time. So buckle up for that one. We talk about a little bit of things here and there, but for the most part, it's a lot of Iron Giant talk. If you're enjoying the show you're listening to, the best way to help us out, and it's free, everybody loves free, give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this from. It helps other fans of pop culture and animation find our podcast. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoy the show. Chris, man, welcome to the show. Real big fan of yours. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Glad to be here, man.
Oh man, I'm glad you're here too because I've really been looking forward to this one. If there's one thing that I absolutely love talking, other than animation, it's my favorite animated movie, and it cracks the top three as far as favorite movie of all time, and it's The Iron Giant. Um,
Wow.
Whenever I say this, fans know and they're tired of hearing the story, but I cook for a living. So whenever somebody tells me like, "Wow, that was the best thing I've ever had," I was like, I can tell you everything wrong with that, and I can tell you everything wrong with this dish. So whenever I say these terms, I always dread what comes next because I've been told like, no, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. But The Iron Giant is a perfect movie. I don't know if you'll agree with me on this one. You might see some things you might want to change, but there's a couple movies that I put this one up there, especially in the animated field. This one, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, come like straight to my mind as two of perfect movies from start to finish. These two movies
Wow.
are classics, and I'm putting Iron Giant ahead of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, man. So I would love, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I think I'm coming down with something, so my voice is like I said, a little bit more distinguished than usual.
Yeah,
But
you got the handsome gravel going on.
maybe it'll work for me. I'm getting a little bit more white.
Maybe.
I'm getting a lot of white
Yeah.
in my beard and shit, so I'm starting to become the least interesting man in the world.
Uh-oh.
Um, yeah, but so with the Iron Giant, man, I would love to just deep dive. And your career and your resume is so damn vast. I mean, you've literally went everywhere. But I would love to stick on the Iron Giant for just a little bit, man. So,
Sure.
do you remember where you were at when you start hearing about this movie? Do you know how you came on board? What
Oh
comes to
yeah.
mind when you think of the Iron Giant?
Well, see, I was already there at the studio when we started. So, I had I spent I'm going to say 9 months on a film called Raygun, which was in development. Brad Bird was directing, and we had a small crew. It was a great story. It was a great, really cool film. I think they're actually doing it now, after all these years. But I was on that film as a supervising animator in development, and 9 months in, it got kind of what they call put into turnaround, which this was at Turner Feature Animation.
Mhm.
So Brad Bird, Tony Ficilli, like a lot of this smallish core group of the people that went to Iron Giant were working on this. Plus, not to mention like a ton of other great artists that came through and did a little bit of work and then moved on. But after it ended, the studio was at this kind of weird spot. I guess they wanted to keep Brad on as a director because he's great, and Turner kind of got taken up by Warner Brothers, so we became Warner Brothers Feature Animation. And I believe you may get a better story from someone else, but I believe what they did was they showed Brad their roster of films that they had in development, and they said, pick one. And he picked Iron Giant, because he liked what they wanted to do with it. He liked what he saw. And at the time, it was supposed to be a musical, and it was spearheaded by Peter Townsend.
Mhm.
And it was kind of based more on the original book. Now, so there was this. So how I got on to Iron Giant was because I was already part of this development group.
Yeah.
And I did do like a brief stint on another film, a live action film, just you know, in that time between when Raygun kind of ended and Iron Giant kind of got up and running. It was probably about 2 or 3 months. I was kind of over on another production, then I came back to Iron Giant. That's how I got on it. And in the beginning, it was a small group, and there was quite a bit of, it was quite a different story and quite a different film at the beginning of it. And then Brad took it with the writers and the development guys, and you know, I was doing visual development, but for them doing story, like script and that kind of stuff. They really took the story and worked it into the film that you see now. I believe part of the reason they were able to do it was, I think, again, you could probably get this story better from somebody else, but I believe that Brad made a deal that if he was going to take the film, that they had to like stay away from him and let him do it. Like, I think they had Warner Brothers was able to have like 2 looks at the script, and that was it. Then they couldn't do anymore. So it was like, I'm going to write a script. You can have a couple of notes. I'll do a rewrite. You can do a little bit of notes, and after that, hands off. You can't tell me what to do. So, so that's probably a large part of why it is the way it is, because Brad and his writers are, you know, Brad himself is like a walking encyclopedia of film. He's just smart, and he knows his film. He knows what he wants to say, and he knows how to say it. So he can speak many languages in the production process. He can speak to executives in executive speak, and he can speak to, you know, he can speak to artists in artist speak, you know, writers and writers speak, you know, that sort of thing. So he can wear many hats, and he's damn talented at all of them.
100%, man. I mean, he's got 3 of my all-time favorite movies. I mean, if I don't see Ratatouille, I mean, it's not like I wouldn't end up in the food industry. I did a little detour with the Navy and stuff like that around 2008, 2009. The market crashes, couldn't find a job, lost my job. So I kind of had to do something. So I joined the military for a little while. And then, you know, before then, I would always wanted to go to culinary school. I wanted to be a chef. And Ratatouille was a big part. That was like the final nail in the coffin in a good sense. Like, it was like the final push to like, hey, I should really chase this. And he had that one. And then I said this a couple weeks ago. I had Scott Capel on, and he was.
Oh, I know Scott. Scott's great.
Oh, great guy. He had some of the cool.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about the production of The Incredibles. And I mean, I said it then and I'll say it now. Brad Bird has done the Fantastic Four better than the Fantastic Four has ever done it with The Incredibles. I mean, every movie that I've ever seen with him attached to it, it's in my opinion, like I said, it's a perfect movie. You know, and then I had, you might know him as well, because he's been around the industry for a little while. You know an animator named Randy Myers?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up, because Randy Myers was one of the first people I got to talk to.
Randy's great too. Yeah.
Dude,
he's a super nice guy.
He was one of the nicest people I've ever had on here. And then he had some of the craziest story, like his brain. I can't remember what I did a couple weeks ago, how this man can remember what he did 30 years ago, the stories that he would bring up, the things that he would talk about. I was just in awe. I mean, there was plenty of times where I was just sitting there with my hand on the side of my head listening, and then he would stop talking. I'm like, oh, I've got to talk now. I don't know what to say. I was enthralled in this story. So Randy is one of the greatest guests I've ever had.
Randy, I think I first, now I don't know Randy super well. I know I had met him at Disney, but we directed on both directed on a show called My Life as a Teenage Robot.
Rob Renzetti.
Yeah, with Rob. I can't remember if he was, I think he was doing it the first season as well. I came in like, I did part of a couple of episodes, I think at the end of the first season, and then most of the second season episodes I co-directed with Rob. And then after that, I think I was out of there. But yeah, it's he's got like Randy's got like a real wide experience. He really worked on a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I said, I don't know if I said this to him or I've said this since I've had him on, but I told him like I said, I can't remember if I told him this. So Randy, I apologize if I didn't tell you this and you're just hearing it now. But he's like the Forrest Gump of animation. He just pops up everywhere. He pops up with the Cal Art guys and Cartoon Network, and then he goes over and does a
Mhm.
little Nickelodeon, and a little Disney, and a little Iron Giant, a little this and a little that. And it's just like, God damn, Randy, you're popping up all over the place. I love it, man. Like I said, he's a great
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Um,
good. And if you're good, yeah, if you're good, you tend to kind of bop around, and if you're good, you end up touching in with these really good productions.
oh,
It's, it
100%.
happens. It happens.
It really does. And speaking of good, man, you guys did a lot of good. Like I said, we're gonna do a lot of Iron Giant talk. So you guys did a lot of good with this Iron Giant, man. So when the movie starts taking shape and
Hmm.
the studio is seeing the last two sets of notes that they're allowed to see, and it's just Brad's Bird's movie now. You guys are
Hmm.
hot and heavy in development. Were you always what's it called, positioned to be a lead supervising animator, excuse me, or was that something you worked up towards during the production of this movie?
No, I was brought on as a supervisor right
Yeah.
from the get-go. Yeah. At first, when we first started, we were instead of like normally on animated features, supervising animators will take a character. Like that's kind of the modern day Disney approach. I think that the DreamWorks does the same thing. It's each supervising animator, they supervise a character and a team of animators in that character. Um, with Iron Giant, we started as sequence directors. It was a different approach. So, and the sequences that they cast us were they tried to cast us sequences that were wrapped around certain characters so that we weren't changing characters with each sequence and in my case, like a lot of the sequences I was cast were centered around Dean or Dean centric, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
um, and that's how it started. So what I would do before, we were working on character designs and stuff like that, but in this, we would go into the story pitches, and we'd visit editorial, and we would visit layout as of going through layout and kind of like guide it through. But it got to a point where Brad realized that it's not it's not going to work as smoothly to
Mhm.
be sequence directors, simply because on a production the sequences don't always come out in into animation in this well thought out way, or this perfect way for sequence directors. Like three sequences might come out that all are supposed to be handled by one guy, and then there's another sequence director down the hall that doesn't have anything, just because the way the sequences are come out, it just didn't work out. So they kind of gravitated over to having us handle the characters. And so for me, my main character was Dean. And
Did you get a say in which character you wanted, or was it just seniority, or how did that work?
no, I don't know how it worked.
Right.
And I wish I could remember. Like, I don't know. I'm sure there was this one day where they said, "Hey, do you want to take Dean?" And I went, "Sure, okay." I mean, I think it was probably as easy as that. Um, I did do a lot of development on Kent, and
Mhm.
I did do some development and supervising on Hogarth, just kind of the overflow that Tony had. Tony was the superstar, director of animation kind of, and he was looking over Hogarth, and he, of course, he's the designer extraordinaire, so he had his hand in the look of all the characters. That's to be expected. I did do some early design work on Kent. Um, and then, but mostly I was doing Dean stuff. Dean was Dean was the main one for me.
Yeah. He had a very I'm pretty sure you've seen this analogy, but a very Jeff Goldblum-esque vibe to him. Like whenever I look at him, like if they do a live action and they could capture, well, I mean, Marvel did it with the de-aging where they put Robert
Right.
Jr. and they made him look a hell of a lot younger. I think they could do it with old Jeff Goldblum or even David Duchovny. I think David Duchovny would be a fantastic
Now there
Dean.
is another one. I think that, early on, I think very early on, they wanted Vince Vaughn to do his
Really?
voice. Yeah, and that was the guy that they were going to do. I actually think, I may be wrong, there was a very, very brief time that George Clooney might have been in there somewhere too, but
I think he'd be a
he
good
didn't
Dean.
he didn't have the swagger, and um but Vince Vaughn was the one they approached first, I believe, and he turned it down. And then they found the perfect voice for him. I mean, geez, after that. So it all worked out great.
Hey guys, it's your resident cartoon junkie Brandon Jones here, asking you to have a listen to my Animation Destination podcast. It's an animation celebration podcast, and it's full of all sorts of stuff about anime and cartoons and voice acting and all that sort of thing, and just a really all-around celebration of anything animated. So come on by and check it out. We've got fan episodes of your favorite animes to your most obscure cartoons on Netflix that no one's ever heard of, and just really love talking about it. You can subscribe to us on Spotify and iTunes and anywhere else you can get your podcasts from. So stop on by, subscribe, and stay tuned for the Animation Destination podcast.
There's a real there was a lot of things that were going on with Dean. Dean was the last character developed. He was the last. All the other characters were designed. I mean, obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but I guess maybe to your listeners that aren't super familiar with the development process, there's a lot of drawings and a lot of time that goes into how those characters look. Hogarth went through a number of different iterations, a whole bunch of them, slowly going this way and that way. And I do have a little story about that. I'll get to in a sec. But I think that I'm saying this through observing Tony as he was, supervising the design of it. It seemed like Kent was nailed fairly quickly, and Annie took, slightly longer than Kent, but it felt like they landed on her design fairly quickly. Hogarth, man, they went so many iterations, and there was only a couple for Dean, but like I said, they had Hogarth, Annie, and Kent, and then they had this kind of foggy thing that was a Dean character, and everybody else is, and there was story, sequences are going into production. It's like, okay, well, and finally it was like, okay, this is what he looks like, and this is what he is. And so there was kind of a lot of stuff that went into Dean's character and his role in the movie, and he had to fit into a movie that almost felt like it was kind of, the story was going along, and then he was kind of like, what do you call it, like dropped into it.
Yeah.
And so, there was one, that speaks to how you make him react, and he's a character that's reacting a lot in the movie to this crazy shit that's going on. But also he has a certain personality where he's got a magnetism to him.
Yeah.
And he had to have that, because you needed to believe that Annie would see something in him, and you had to believe that it wasn't forced, or they weren't trying really hard, and you wanted to maintain the appeal of Dean. So he didn't come off as some guy that was on the make, or he was trying to, Dean is just very much comfortable with who he is, and that was a big part. It's partly thematic for the movie, right? You are who you choose to be, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I know that, there's the really, while we were making the movie, the thematic thing that went through was you are who you choose to be. I know that Brad has said since then in interviews, like, there was a thematic thing of, what if a gun has a soul?
Yeah.
That kind of came later though. When we were working on it, it was like the idea of you are who you choose to be. And Dean had to have all these things, and he had to do them in a very subtle way all the way through the picture. So it was a kind of I was going to say it's a challenge, but it was a thing. You had to really be aware of how you were making him act and how you were making him react. It was real important, to finesse how he was acting and reacting to things, because he did have this kind of subtle but strong role in the movie, in the story.
He's a very fun character. I mean, there's a couple scenes that I point to whenever. So this is the scene I knew this movie was something special, and it's not something that I picked up on when I was younger. It was something that I picked up on way later, when I started to look at animation a lot differently than I did when I was a kid, like most people do. Once you become an adult, or once you become super hooked into something, whether it's comic books, sports, movies, film, music, whatever it is, you tend to look at things from a different view, right? You look at them, not for just what we're seeing, like what was the context behind that? What was the reasoning they did that? Why did he do or she do this, that, the other with their hair, their eyes? Why did they do this, right? So it wasn't until I want to say about 10 years ago, give or take, so I'm on, a deployment, I'm watching this movie, and the train sequence happens, and you see the little nod to Disney, right? Brad Bird with Frank and Ollie, and I'm like, no. So I rewound it, and then I remember seeing a picture with them where they were, tinkering around with the train and stuff like that in the back of their house, and I think they had probably just passed at that point, so it might have been an article I had read, and it was a picture of, them on the train and shit, and I was like, this son of a bitch did it. He just tied in people that he looked up to when he was doing his Disney run, so Frank and Ollie. So it was such a beautiful moment. It was so touching. But getting back to Dean for just a sec, that was the scene that really sold it on me about, like I said, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was.
Well, but Brad had worked, when he was young, he worked at the Disney studio, and he worked with all those guys. I mean, he worked directly under Milt Kahl for a while. So he was around all those guys. He's a real animation geek, and he's had the experience with those guys,
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
So just seeing that little nod to, I love seeing, and it's come up so many times in these podcasts, like I love seeing when you guys take a scene and you put something of yourself in a background, or you put something of yourself into that scene, something that's personable, somebody that might not pick it up, like a regular fan might not pick it up, but you'll always see it. And somebody that they know they will see that, like, oh shit, man, Chris did this one because I see that little thing he put in the background. So whenever I can see something like that, it makes it more sentimental. It makes it mean something, right? So seeing that, I was like, oh, that was his love letter. And this is what this podcast is. This podcast is a love letter to you guys. It's a love letter to animation and comic books, because you guys elicited a feeling in me at such a young age, and that translated into an adulthood. And I get to share these movies, these experiences, these stories, not only with everybody that listens and watches the show. Thank you for watching and listening, ladies and gentlemen, but I get to share it with my kids as well, right? So it's something special that I really hold on to. And going back, like I said, going back to Dean, what I absolutely love, just Dean, I don't want to say he was the comic relief, but he had so many scenes in there where there was a shit ton of tension, or there was a shit ton of like, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a 200-foot robot out here, right? And then it's just the first scene I see Dean in, where it's not the squirrel, right? It's the scene where they bring the giant to the junkyard, and then he's like, he can stay here, right? And then Dean slowly gets up. He pours his coffee out. He slowly shuffles off and slams the door. And then it goes 37 minutes later, and he's still talking to Hogarth in here. That scene is everything about that character. He's fun, he's interesting. You don't know what he's gonna do. You know, and then the tidal wave scene where the giant jumps in the lake and stuff like that. It's just like, oh shit, you know. So it's he's such a fun character, man.
Yeah. He's like, it's because it's that cool thing that he has, and it does kind of like excuse me, he does have this thing where he goes with the flow, right?
Absolutely.
So and he sticks up for the weirdos and the goofballs and the, you know, as he does for Hogarth in the diner. And he's cool with he sees the you know, the weirdo and the goofball as, you know, as someone he can relate to, I guess, you know. But he's always cool, except it presents conflicts to him when, you know, things get super crazy, and then the cool facade kind of drops in a comical way, you know. He doesn't freak out like a normal person freaks out.
Nah, he's just like, fuck it, I'm out of here.
Yeah, it's just like, and it's like, doesn't have to talk. He just gets up and walks out of the room, or he just, you know, he'll yell at somebody, or he'll be smug to somebody. You know, he likes to thumb his nose at authority when he gets a chance. There, like I said, there's a lot to that dude, you know. And you know, you're working with like this really good script, so the writers have given you all this great stuff, and you just, you know, like I do remember that scene where by the lake, and you know, the giant does the cannonball into the thing, and he's there with his, you know, it's the summer, he's there with his, you know, he's still got his jeans and his boots on and everything, like, and he's sitting in the chair reading the newspaper, and it's like, and the wave is about to hit him, and he's just like, yep. And you know, that is in the writing. I mean, it was animated really nicely, you know, and you know, you get a chance to, you know, you get a chance to pose it and stuff or whatever, but it's in the writing, it's in there, you know. And you know, you enjoy it in the watching in the movie, and we kind of get this bonus of, we get it when we read the script, and we're laughing and go, oh man, oh dude, this is so funny. And then you get to animate it, or I didn't animate those scenes, but I supervise the scenes, but you get to play it out, you know, and you know it's funny, and so you get to just play out this joke, and you get to enjoy it when you watch other people laugh at it, you know?
Yeah. How do you slip into a character like that? You specifically, I mean, whenever you get handed a character, or you ask for a character, how do you become that character? How do you breathe life into this character?
Well, first of all, you kind of got to do your homework on the character. That's one thing, is that you have to kind of get all the information you can about, you know, what the director needs out of this character, for one thing. That sounds kind of weird now that I'm listening to it coming out of my mouth, but you know, a director's trying to tell a story. Your character is part of that story. Now, yes, you need to take on that character, but the thing is, you need to have a good idea of where they fit in the story, the way the director wants to tell it. He wants this type of character. Okay, then the second thing you do is you kind of give yourself, or try to get the backstory. Where are they from? What have they done? You know, and if you don't have it, you kind of invent it if you have to get in there. But in the case of Dean, a little bit different than other characters. Dean came along for me at a really interesting time in my life. You said you were 33?
I'm 33 now. Yeah, I just turned 33.
I was 33 when I worked on Iron Giant. And I had so I had just gotten married.
Mhm.
And we had just had, well, I got married a couple of years earlier, and my son, my first son, had just been born. He's an Iron Giant production baby.
Yeah.
He's almost 25 now. But so imagine this in your life is like I'm, I'm a guy from Canada, normal guy, you come down here to LA, relocate to a new place with my fiance, we get married. So now you're married. And then within, between when I'm 29 and I'm 33, I went from a single guy with a girlfriend to being married and having a kid.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big life change. And it does take some adjustment, and having a kid is a huge deal. And so I was in this place where I was a new father. I was newly married. My life was changing.
Mhm.
I had a new baby to take care of, and things were changing. It was similar to Dean. Dean was just kind of trucking along in his life, having his espresso and and listening to cool jazz, and then suddenly this kid comes into his life, and he's got this ginormous robot, and it's like, what in the hell and he develops a fondness for this boy, and who leads him to this woman who he develops a fondness. His life is changing in a pretty extreme way. And so there was some parallels there with my life. So I could use my kind of life experience and pour it into Dean in a certain way and filter it through like the cool guy that
Yeah.
the 50s cool dude, and I could pretend, he's 50s cool dude, and I can play that part and how he would react. And so I could put a little bit of my life experience into the character. And that for Dean, that's what I did,
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit of that in there. There's a little bit of just, your experience that you have just in the industry and as an animator, what you think would work. It's kind of the same as what an actor would do. If you get acting chops that you're able to kind of gather over the years, you can kind of get them and mold them into something you can inject into a character, and it's going to kind of work a certain way. But the real truthfulness of it comes, and the uniqueness comes from your own life experience and your own perspective, and you're trying to put a little bit of that in. You're trying not to do the cliche stuff, and you're trying not to do what everybody else does. You're trying to make it unique. So that's where it comes from. It's work, but it's really rewarding when it pays off. And and all my career, that's kind of what I've tried to do when I've taken on characters. It's just you try to find whatever kind of unique thing you can put in there, and say something a little bit differently or in a little bit different way that might resonate with people. And if you're lucky, it works.
It worked gangbusters for you guys in this movie. Now, when you sit back and you think about everything, every property you've touched, every character you've worked on, every animated or every show you've animated on, where
Mhm.
does Dean rank up there for you?
Oh, pretty high.
Yeah.
He was yeah, because I'm trying to think. I don't think I had another experience, or have had another experience in my career where I was able to have, I was going to say freedom, but not freedom, but I had a lot of say, or a lot of influence in how that character came about, like on the screen, how it's portrayed on the screen. And it came about, at least I was lucky enough. I'm trying to do the math in my head quickly here. I think I was about 7 years,
Mhm.
96, no, maybe more, 90, 96, maybe 7 or 9 years into my career. So it was just enough that I could at least be able to do what I wanted to do with the character. Like, it wasn't like, you know, I'd only been in the business for a year or so, and I still had a lot to learn. And you know, I still was wrapping my head around how to animate and stuff like that. You know, I'm always learning and I'm always trying to improve. But it was fortunate that it came along where I at least, you know, the things that I had in my head, I had acquired the skills to be able to do. So, yeah, he ranks up there pretty high. I worked on another film called Mary Poppins Returns, where I had a couple of characters in there where, you know, I was able to do a lot with them, you know, just have some freedom to do stuff. And there's been other characters, little bits, scenes here and there of stuff, but nothing like, you know, a whole film, whole character as successfully done and as, you know, and fits into such a beloved film like Dean does in Iron Giant. You know, those things don't come around very often. I do remember telling the guys that were working on my team that there was a thing that Brad did on this film that was slightly different than what they do normally with films. Now, like I said, a supervising animator will take a character on a film. So when you see those Disney films, I don't know if they do it exactly the same way now, but let's say we're going to teleport back to the 90s, and you know, most of those Disney films, they had a supervising animator for a certain character, and then they had a crew of animators on that character, and you just you just worked on that one character for the most part through the film. Now, normally then when what they call casting, so when the director and the animation director come in, they go, okay, I have a bunch of shots here. I want to give, you know, Julian, you're going to get these shots. Chris, you're going to get these shots. And they cast them by the shot. And it's, if you're on that team in that Disney way, you're going to get shots of basically of your character all the time.
Yeah.
Now, that's not what Brad did on Iron Giant. Brad cast the whole film sequentially almost. So each animator got like a run of shots in a row for the most part, not complete. You know, you got some things that you got one shot here and there, but for a lot of it, like a lot of animators got a chunk of shots. Now, when they did cast it, the people that were on my team, they were getting chunks of shots that were kind of Dean heavy, but they still had to animate the other character.
Yeah.
So for me, like, say, for example, I animated this section where, you know, Hogarth goes into Dean's, you know, little place there, and he says, you know, the whole CoffeeZilla thing. Said, you want milk or what? Milk? Yeah, oh, coffee's fine. Coffee, yeah, you know, it's espresso, you know, it's CoffeeZilla, all that stuff up until the up until the point where he's like talking. Well, you know, it kind of drifted off after that, but those are a chunk of scenes. So I was animating Hogarth and Dean, but because it was a Dean-driven sequence, I was animating Hogarth and Dean. So my point, what I'm getting to here is that for the younger animators, or the ones that were, like, say, a couple of years into their careers, I was telling them at the time, they were getting really nice shots to do. Now, when you talk about really nice shots as an animator, like, a lot of animators would like those close-up shots where it's a lot of acting, and those are shots that normally at other studios are saved for the supervisors and the important animators get those like primo shots, and the younger, you know, guys just getting in the industry, they get the long shots where the character is really tiny in screen and stuff like that. Now on Iron Giant, they were getting these. So younger animators, or animators starting in their career, were getting shots, and some of them were close-ups, and some of them were like nice or longer shots, but like with a lot of acting in it and stuff. And it was great. And I was telling them at the time, like, guys, this doesn't happen very often. Like, you take these shots and do them well, because you go to another studio, you probably won't be getting shots this nice. And not only is just the shot selection nice, but the writing is good, the line delivery is good. I mean, the whole thing is set up. It's just dropped into your lap, this really nice scene. So I said, like, take the time, do it well, because this will look great on your portfolio reel. Like, this will last a long time. And I made a point with all those guys, you know, and you know, and they listened. There was an animator on my team called Jim Vanderkaal. He's a great animator, and he did some real nice animation of Kent and that in a sequence that I was working on him with, and he got nominated for an Annie Award for it, and good for him, because he deserved it. And you know, it was just one of those things that, you know, part of my job as a supervising animator, I believe, is part of it is, yes, you're directing the animators and telling them, okay, you know, have them, maybe, you know, let's have them act like this and have them act like this. And, oh, maybe you want a few more in-betweens here, or change the eyebrow here, you know, those type of things.
Yeah.
But it's also like recognizing the stuff that, you know, that the guys on your team, where they could really improve or really could get something out of, and you make sure they don't miss that. You know, you kind of want to make sure that they get the most out of, you know, their experience on the movie, you know, come out at the end of the movie a lot better than when they went in. That's kind of, to me, is a cool part of being a supervisor. It's like, you know, you take these guys and you make sure that they're taking advantage of the things that they can take advantage of. So at the end, it's like they worked on a great film, but they also got, you know, a lot more. They're a lot better than they were before. That's a cool part of being a supervisor. Yeah,
that's a good part about being a good leader too, man. Because when you've got somebody that's out there that's really in the trenches with you, I've said it so many times. I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but when it comes to work, man, I'd much rather go and work for less money if the people are good. Like, I didn't realize that when I was younger. I always just thought it was like, oh, I got to go someplace where I can work and I get lots of money for it because they take lots of my time for it. It wasn't until probably my last deployment. I'm 24, 25. And then with the government, you're making the same money no matter what. If you're a certain rank, you're making a certain money. But I started thinking, I was like, fuck, man, I would much rather work in a shithole job for shit money and be surrounded by great people that strive to make you better, that they want the good things for you, than I ever would want to be making way more money and then just the people are shit. It's, ladies and gentlemen, you'll find that out as you get older. It's all about the people you work with. And speaking, go ahead.
No, I was gonna completely agree with you, because and you know, if you found that out at 25, then you found it out very, very early. But I'd say, like, and I've said this before, when I look back, now I've been doing this for, I don't know, whatever it is, 35 years or whatever it's been. When I look back at the productions that I really, really like, it has really almost nothing to do with how good the movie was. It's all about the people. The productions I think back on and go, oh, dude, that was such a blast. It was a blast because of the people.
Yes.
The people you hung out with, the people you went to lunch with, the people you went for beers with after work, or goofing around in the studio, and that stuff. And, you know, it's like you say, it could be the crappiest job, but it's the people. Yes. And it could have crappy pay, crappy, you know, like, could be that. I mean, lucky enough, you know, when you talk about Iron Giant, you know, I was paid, my salary was pretty good, and the people I work with were pretty good, and the job was pretty good. So it's like a triple win. But you know, win. And but I've worked on films that at the time we were just, and I'm not going to say what they were, but at the time,
what's it rhyme with, Chris? What's it rhyme?
Not even saying. And you know, this film sucks, you know, and but you're having a blast. It's like, I don't care, you know, I'll do my best work. I'm having fun doing it. It's not, you know, I'm not putting this film together. I'm just animating on it. You know, you just, but the crew is fun and the people are fun and you're having a great time. And in the end, you're like, man, that was a blast. I'd do that again tomorrow if we could, you know. It's people, always the people. And that'll continue, you know, for you, you know, 20 years from now, you'll be saying the same thing. You'll just be going, people.
Absolutely, man. And
Yeah.
speaking of people, a couple more questions and then we'll rotate into the fans' questions. One thing I absolutely love that I didn't start doing until recently was when a project comes out. Obviously, you guys get to see it before fans get to see it before it's released to the masses to see. Um, but I got to imagine that seeing it at the studio and then seeing it with out in the wild, if you will, with a whole bunch of people that aren't a part of the studio, they paid their money to go see this movie. Did you get to see this with, like I said, out in the wild? Did you get to go to a movie theater and watch The Iron Giant with just a regular group of people?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What was that feeling like?
It's pretty cool because you get to hear them kind of react to things that you've spent all this time kind of constructing for them to react that way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And
Oh, it does.
and yeah, it can be very satisfying. It can be very emotional.
Getting nervous going into a situation like that?
Not not really, no, because you've done your bit, you've done your stuff, you've more than likely, if you've worked on a film, you've already seen it
Mhm.
a number of times, maybe, especially in like all the rough cuts that you watch and every sequence that you watch, and then you see it all together, and you know, okay, wow, there's the film is done, and you usually see it at some sort of wrap party or premiere. But yeah, it is a different, you go with an audience and see it. And like when I went to see Iron Giant, um, everybody applauded at the end. Like it was like,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow. And it, you know, usually they'll politely applaud at well, no, I shouldn't say that. They enthusiastically applaud at the premiere. Because they're like, it's kind of this high five feeling. It's like, man, we did it. Yeah. And everybody's clapping. But to hear like an enthusiastic applause at the end of a movie, like just in your normal, like, you know, theater with everyday people in it that hadn't seen the film before, that's pretty cool. Like you just, you go, wow, they really like it, you know. But I don't recall like any, if it was any feelings strong either way, other than just going, man, that's pretty cool. Just,
Yeah.
you know, you walk out of the studio kind of going, wow. It's funny because I was about to say, you walk out of the studio going, wow, we made a pretty good film. But we already knew we made a good film. Like it's one of those things. We made the film, we saw it, we go, that's a damn good film, man. That's a damn good film. And so if it went out and it was like crickets, you'd be kind of going, man, like you guys didn't recognize how good this movie was. I mean, it's kind of like that, you know. I guess it's kind of the same as like, you know, if you were doing music or something, or if you like an album like you really like and you play it for your friends and they all just go like,
Eh,
yeah, oh, okay. You're like, you're kind of like, oh, well, okay, sucks
we
to be
can't be
you then.
we can't be friends anymore.
Just like, sucks to be you. I'll listen to it with headphones on then. You know, so yeah, it's kind of like that. But
Was there
yeah,
any,
it is. Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Was there any scenes in there when you're watching this with a crowd? Was there any
Mhm.
scenes that, I don't know how to word this because I don't want to sound like a dick saying that. So obviously, with you working on the movie, you've seen it so many times.
Mhm.
So you're going to see the scenes. You're probably seeing it through the entire process from
Yeah.
start to finish, the rough in betweens and all this other stuff. But
Mhm.
was there any scene in the movie when you're watching it with the audience that you were surprised that it got a big laugh there, or did anything like jump out at you going like, oh wow, I didn't think people were going to really catch on to that, or I didn't think they were going to laugh that hard that long, you know, at that scene or
Yeah, there was, and there was two scenes in particular, and it had nothing to do with me. My good friend Ron Hugart, he animated the shot of the giant right before he hits the missile, where he's looking up and he goes, Superman, and then it's
dude.
done, right? And I remember when he was animated. Now, you know, sorry, Ron, if you're listening to this. Ron. It was a super simple shot, an animation. It was, you know, it was essentially a couple of poses of him just drifting into this thing. Now, the key comes in the expression, because they had to do some work with that giant to get expressions to read. You know, you're working with this mechanical way of the way the giant was designed, because he's a robot, right? So, you know, so he finessed this angle, and he finessed it so that last pose really just fucking hit home, you know? And then he just went like, just basically like moved into that pose for the whole shot. It was really simple shot, but holy cow, that is over all the years, anyone says anything about the Iron Giant, they always mention that shot. It's like the shot that hits everybody, and you know, emotionally.
Every single time. It makes
me
every single time.
And so, like, it says something to me in that it's like, it's not always the complicated stuff that does it. It's not always the worked over, you know, slaved over this beautiful thing I created for you. No, it's the moment. It's knowing when to just hit the one pose and keep everything simple. It's where it lands in the story. It's all the work that the story and the movie has done correctly up to that point, so that it brings you there emotionally, and then boom, it hits. So that was a real kind of, well, not an eye-opener, but it was a real, it really told me something. Now, the other shot is almost the opposite of that. And so Ron Hugart did that shot. Steve Markowski, who was the supervising animator on The Giant, and I believe he won the annual award for that. He deserved it. He did the shot where the giant gets hit, where he's carrying in the battle scene, he gets hit, falls out of the sky. He drops Hogarth. He picks up Hogarth thinking that he's killed him. So there's a shot where the giant is, I believe he's like kneeling down in the snow, and he goes to like pick up Hogarth, and he's shaking, and he's starting to cry, and all this emotion is coming out of the robot. And it's one of the nicest pieces of animation, in my opinion, of almost any movie. It is so well done, and it's so intricate, so much going on, so many, like, what we call little staggers and shakes that all have to be choreographed, and the looking around, and it just portrays the moment so well. It's like you really, really sense the feel of it. And again, it's because, you know, all the stuff you've seen in the movie up to that point, that whole business, then when they're in the forest earlier with the dead deer, and all that stuff comes, and you can just feel it coming through the giant. You can feel it coming off the screen. Totally opposite type of shot, like so much work going into animating all those tiny little movements and choreographing them all so they all work, you know, in the right way. And then he gets blasted from behind by the you know, the fire, you know. So that shot to me is one of those things when I don't hear as many people talk about that shot as they talk about the, you know, Superman shot. And no offense to my buddy Ron, but I look at I go, when people say, oh man, yeah, Superman, and I go, yeah, but did you see the shot where he's like on his knees and he's shaking? But that thing is freaking amazing. It's like, you know, and that doesn't really get talked about too much. So there you go. It's like almost like opposites there. You know, you got one that's talked about a lot, one that's not really talked about too much, but both animated brilliantly in two completely different ways, you know.
Beautiful, man. I'm glad you talked about those two shots, because like I said, that Superman gets me every single time.
Yep.
I'm trying not to cry now, so sorry.
It's an emotional thing.
It really is. And I didn't take when I was younger and I saw the scene that we were just talking about where he
Mm.
thinks that Hogarth is dead, you know, until I had a kid, I couldn't feel the way that you
Yes.
just felt, because having a kid and then looking at it in that sense, that's where it gets me. Like
Yeah.
there's one or two ways that I go the complete nuclear option. There's three ways really. You fuck with my wife, you fuck with my kids, or you fuck with my dogs. It's
Uh-huh.
generally those three things, and I'm going to fight anybody and everybody, and I'm going to kill anybody and everybody in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck with those three things. But like I said, it wasn't until I had my first son where I see that scene, and then I'm like, oh shit, this is a lot deeper than
Yeah.
it was before. The first time I saw this, the second time I saw whatever it was, you know, seeing this as an adult, seeing this with kids, I was like, it hits home a lot more. So it's, I'm glad you brought up those two scenes. And
Yeah.
before we go ahead, go.
One thing I'll interject is that that comes in a little bit with, you know, what I was talking about earlier with how the Dean assignment came into my life at a certain time as being a new dad. That does so change your outlook on that. I could use that in, you know, what is it like? He's starting to have feelings for this kid, you know, like he likes this kid, and it's like he feels like he needs to like help this kid out, you know, like this kid's cool, man. Like, yeah, dude, yeah, I mean, it seems to go without saying, but dude, having a kid just so changes you, you know, like
Absolutely.
your life focus just goes over here. The perspective completely changes, and
You
you're
don't matter
yeah,
anymore. It's
and
all
you're
about that little kid.
and yeah, and totally your like reaction to things in movies are like completely different. Yeah, you know, just your reaction to things when you see things happen with kids, it's just like, yeah, completely different than somebody like who's never had kids before. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely, man. And before we rotate to the fans' questions, I don't think I've ever showed it, so I don't really work out too much anymore. My first tattoo was actually the giant. So
Really?
yes, 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 yes. I'm gonna see if I can get a decent. So I don't know if you can really see him
Holy
there,
crap. Look at that.
but yeah, so Swamp Thing's right below him. But yeah,
Damn.
that's the giant. He's sitting on the mountain. Everybody that I always
That's nice.
they say that it looks like the Giants taking a shit on the mountain. I was like, shut up, man! Don't try to ruin my tattoo right now. But yeah, so like I said, I've been a huge fan of this movie. You guys, like I said, I say it's a perfect movie. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys work on it. Like, nah, I know where we could have fixed something there, that, or the other. But you know, it's perfection isn't really in the eye of the beholder. I think it's probably beauty is in the eye of the beholder, whatever that whatever that,
Yeah.
that trope is, but I want to use it for perfection. So I look a little bit smarter. But this is a perfect movie, Chris, is what I'm getting at.
I think that most of the people that worked on it, they have their own experiences working on it, because you know, you have your experience working on the film, and then you have the film, the resulting film. Two different things. So most people that are in animation, you know, have been in the business long enough to know the difference between that.
Yeah.
And they can sometimes, if they watch a film that they had a really difficult time on, it's really hard for them to watch the film because it keeps bringing them back to that. For me in Iron Giant, I had a great time on that film. When I watched the film, I'm not really brought back to being on the film. I just enjoy the film as it is. I just watch it and go, wow, that's, you know, that's really great. I've been around long enough. I don't linger on the oh man, I wish I did. Oh man, I would change. Oh, why did I do that? No, I don't. That disappears fairly quickly after the after my work is done on the stuff, you know,
It's
because
probably a good thing to do.
yeah, because it's a good way to, you know, shorten your lifespan, or at least give you a couple of ulcers, is to just spend the rest of your life going, oh, why didn't I do that? You know, it's like, dude, the film's done, it's out, you know, people love it. Be happy with that, you know. Yeah.
That's a good perspective to have, man. And before we rotate to the fans' questions, there's one I want to hit you with that I think is pretty fitting. When you hear the name, the Iron Giant, if you
Mhm.
could sum that up into a couple sentences, maybe a phrase, a word, you know, what is some of the first things that get brought to the front of your mind when you hear that, the Iron Giant?
But you know, a word did come into my head right away, and I said, no, that's a stupid word. Um, and weirdly, I should just say it because it came into my head. The word was honesty.
Mhm.
Isn't that weird? It doesn't really probably doesn't make sense to anybody. But it's because of my perspective on the movie and like going through the process of being on the production and everything. But I feel like, you know, I almost, you know, I may even have trouble explaining why that word came in, but it did. And I think it's because that's the way everybody approached working on the film in so many different ways. People were just trying to be to get an honest performance,
Yeah.
you know, and an honest approach to it. And not only that is like we knew at the time that it was a special movie, and we were doing our best to make sure that we ushered that movie out to the masses as best we could. You know, it was like, you got this really good thing. Don't be the guy that fucks it up. You know, that kind of thing. It's like, don't drop the ball.
Yeah.
And maybe there's maybe a little responsibility, but to me, it's honesty. Like I remember when I was doing the animation on that, I kept trying to dig deeper, be more honest, be more real, you know, with the performance, what I did, be more honest with, you know, the people I was working with about, you know, how we needed to do this. There were some pretty deep conversations about acting stuff and motivations and that between us guys animating. You know, you're trying to really get an honest, you know, piece of art out. So that's my word. it 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 is, as the word is, honest. It was actually what came to my mind as soon as you said that. And it's funny, in that, funny, I don't know if it's funny, but it's revealing to me because I've never been asked that question before. That's the first time anybody's asked that
Well,
of me.
I'm glad I could pop that cherry, Chris, because
And it's kind of revealing to me that that's the word that comes to mind right off the bat. Isn't that it's revealing to me. So
well,
that's cool.
I like that. I like that answer, man, because like I said, it's a perfect movie. You guys were honest with each other, and you guys, just like you said, kept digging deeper to get the realness, the rawness, whatever you want to use to define that. I mean, I like I said, I really like that one. So we're gonna rotate in the fans' questions here. This is one of my favorite parts of the show because the fans that ask these questions are a lot smarter than me, and they can ask a lot more succinct questions, and they can bring up shit that I didn't really think about. But before we get to those, man, we got two questions. Your Mount Rushmore. So you get four people plus one is an honorable mention. Yes. Yes.
How many do I have to
You
pick?
get four people plus an honorable mention. So five people in total, but four on your Mount Rushmore, and then one's an honorable mention.
Jeez. Okay. Let me just think. So your Mount Rushmore is
Animators that inspired you.
animators that inspired me. Okay, I'm gonna start with like the easiest one, and I'm gonna name Milk Call up there. And I know I'm probably gonna do a little bit of explaining to these things. Is I know that there are other of the 9 men that, you know, and I'm fully aware of all the other animators, you know, how they gravitate towards certain of the 9 men. And I understand that Milk Call is like the easiest, you know, the one everybody picks, the one if nobody knows any 9 men and they want to look cool at the animation party, they say Milk Call, even if they have no idea who he is.
You're the only third person that's brought up Milk Call.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually it's a lot of Frank and Ollie. Mine's always been Mark Davis. I'm a huge Mark Davis fan. But yeah, Milk Calls come up probably like the last 2 or 3 episodes I've done. Milk Calls come up.
Okay. Mark, yeah, and I'm familiar enough with all the 9 men, and there's stuff that I love about all of them as their way. There is just something about when I see Milk Call's animation and his drawing, and I know people have different opinions about it, and I know other people did stuff that was more deep and more, unique or whatever, but there's just something about when I see like Milt Kahl drawings and his animation just makes me want to animate. Like
Yeah.
I see his drawing and it just makes me want to draw. So I think he's probably the one. And then I'm gonna go maybe second, you think. Okay, I'm gonna go a different way. And I'm gonna say Tex Avery, probably.
Yeah.
Because I'm a cartoon guy, I'm not really a Disney guy.
Mhm.
When I was young, I saw the Disney films. I thought they were like, ooh, these are like the really nice films. But the ones I saw more than anything were like the Warner Brothers films when I was a kid, the Bugs Bunnies and the all that. And I love those. And I probably would have put Chuck Jones there, but then I started seeing Tex Avery films. And the Tex Avery stuff was, to me, I watched that and I go, that it was like, it's super energizing to me. It's
Mhm.
like if I watch stuff that, especially the more stylized stuff, I just see that and I go, man, it just, again, it makes me want to animate. It makes me want to do stuff with animation. There's stuff like in Deputy Droopy, the deputy, the sheriff and Deputy Droopy, when he's walking and firing the guns off, a piece of animation is just so brilliantly done. It just like, and it's flat and it's graphic and it just looks phenomenal. And I just could just keep watching that stuff like over and over and over and over. And I used to watch it all the time when I was young and early on in animation. It just energized me and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't really feel like doing the Cinderella animation or whatever. I wanted to do that funny cartoony stuff. It was so cool. So that would be number 2, I guess. And then so I got Milt, I got Tex. Rolling off of Tex Avery, then I might go to Ed Benedict then, because of that design style. I really like it. Now, Ed Benedict kind of leads you into the kind of the 60s, kind of 60s guys, like, well, where I like their stuff, Holly Pratt and like Mel Crawford, like that type of stuff, the Golden Book stuff. I love that stuff, that design stuff, the kind of H&B-ish type stuff. But for me, it started with Ed Benedict and his kind of design, the way it kind of gravitated and ended up being this stuff. So for me, there's other guys that are float around in that universe fairly close, but to me, I say Ed because he was the first one that I discovered and the first one that I kind of knew his name and who he was, and then he led me to the other guys. So I'll say Ed Benedict up there. And you know what I'm going to say for number 4? It's going to be weird and you're probably not even going to know who it is. And it's because he's not in animation. He's a guitar player named he's a guitar player named Guthrie Govan.
I don't know who it is, but you're the second person that's brought up John Sanford by chance?
Yes. Oh yes.
So he brought he was like go
who did he pick?
He was like, this is gonna sound weird. He was like, Van Halen is on my Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah. I could say Eddie Van Halen, because like I started playing. So the quick backstory here. I started taking guitar lessons when I was like 9, or maybe 11. I think it was 11. I started playing guitar when I was 9. Started taking lessons when I was like 10 or 11. And I went, when I was finishing high school, that was my thing. It was either I was going to go into music or go into animation. There were my 2 dream jobs: music, animation, both dream jobs. I was like, I love both of them. And so I went to, after high school, we toured colleges, and there just happened to be a college like 30 minutes away that was like world renowned teaching animation. And like, I didn't even know you could do it for a living. And I was like, this is amazing. And I went to graphic design for a bit, but I applied for that and I got in. So I thought, okay, I can go to college and learn how to animate. I'm already taking guitar lessons. I can, so I'm learning guitar, learning music. I'm in bands. and I'm going to college for animation. This is great. I'm doing both, And then as it turns out, like after college is over, I get a job in animation. I go, that's great. I got a job. Okay, I can pay the bills. I can keep doing my guitar. I can be in a band. And so basically what happens over the years is like I kept getting jobs in animation and I kept making a living out of animation. So I kept doing that. And they just, my guitar playing just became a hobby that, I love doing. And the great thing about that is like I get to do whatever the heck I want to with my guitar playing because I don't have to worry about making a living with it. Right.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but I follow a lot of guitar players, and I was, yes, I'll agree with John, because I was a huge Eddie Van Halen fan when I still am. I was heartbroken when he passed away a couple of years ago. It really hurt me. Really, yeah, just I did a whole series of posts on social media back when that happened. There's just, you listen with Eddie, if you listen to some of the isolated tracks like Beautiful Girls or something like that, the guitar playing on there for a kid that was like 23, it's just phenomenal. The groove, the feel, it's amazing. And then like the other side of that, this funny sidecar to that is like you got that red with white and black stripes pattern, like he painted his guitar that way, and now anybody that sees that pattern immediately thinks of Eddie Van Halen. And it's like not many guitar players have like a pattern that that reminds you of that. Yes, but I'll let John take Eddie Van Halen, and I'm going to go with Guthrie Govan, just simply because he's a phenomenal guitar player, but he is not he's not a huge rock star. Mm-hmm. He plays kind of more eclectic, almost fusion-y kind of music, but with fun to it. He's in a band called the Aristocrats, and phenomenal musicians, but they do it with a kind of a funny vibe to it. Mm-hmm. But part of the thing I like about him is he's one of the best guitar players you'll see around, but he's totally focused on his music. But when you see interviews and that with him, he's really well spoken, and he really brings out a lot in the interviews when he speaks, and how he presents things, and how he explains things that he's doing. Mm-hmm. I really liked it. And so years ago when things were happening and I would have to do interviews and stuff, like I would watch his interviews and I would see how he conducted himself and how he spoke and how he presented what he was doing, because he is kind of like animation. He's doing something that guitarists watch guitar videos, animation geeks watch animation videos. It's not like a huge, it's not like something that has a gigantic audience, so that knows a lot about it. So you kind of have to put things in a way that people that aren't in that orbit can at least get something and engage them and entertain or
associate themselves with.
Yeah, be engaging or be interesting. So I'll put him up there just because, one, he deserves to be up there because he's so freaking good. But also because he did influence me in a different way, in that, one, I'm a guitar player and he's a great guitar player, and I love the way he does stuff. Not that I can play anything that he does. But yeah, it was to me how he presented himself, how he always well-spoken, well thought out, engaging, and funny at the same time. So there you go. Is that it?
But you got an honorable mention.
Oh man, really? Yeah, I don't know. People that are these people that have influenced me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. I don't know if I can think of any more. I could go the easy out and say it was my parents or something, but I won't do that, even though they did. There was a few. A couple of people I worked with early on in my career. I'll name two of them: Darley Brewster and Bob Jakes. They're probably, if they're listening to this, they're probably going, what? And if anybody else in animation like is listening to it right now, they're probably going, what? But they were pretty influential for me early on in my career. I was really lucky that I got to work with them in my first few years of animation, because they are people I have immense respect for, and they're great teachers. And they took the time to show me how to do things that I probably would have taken years and years and years to discover on my own. Darlie Brewster showed me how to do the finessed Disney animation, the discipline of the timing and the discipline of the spacing of the drawings and that. Bob Jakes taught me design, and like Darlie does a lot of like really fluid Disney style animation brilliantly. Bob Jakes does the super cartoony stuff. He was directing animation on a lot of the first Ren and Stimpy shows and stuff. He's amazing, and he showed me a lot about design. Brilliant designer, super cartoony style animator. Again, another guy that's like a walking encyclopedia of animation history. Showed old, would run 35 mil prints or 16 mil prints of old cartoons. He was the one that got me knowing who all these old cartoony animators were. So I'll put those two up as my honorable mentions, because yes, it would have taken me years to discover the stuff that they taught me within the first couple of years I was in animation. It was being like super injected with cool information, like, and my skills took years to catch up with the information that they had given me in my brain. So,
well, I hope they get to hear this, because there's nothing better than when a mentor gets to hear that their student, their friend, their young Padawan. I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, but their young Padawan took something from them investing their time into you. So it always means a lot, because I've heard it a few times from doing, from cooking, or when COVID started, we all got sent home, and I did this little, it's a shameless plug for my little cooking channel, but the Vanilla Gorilla Kitchen. So everything that I learned since I was 12 years old, I would teach people how to do just on Facebook. I'd get bored as hell. So, every night I would go live at 7:05 or live at 5:05, live at 6:05, something that would rhyme, to pick a time, and that's when we would go live. And then anything that I've learned from a YouTube channel, from a book, from a TV show, from culinary school, from all the chefs I work for, I taught that to people, and it did a lot of cool stuff. I got a lot of cool stuff with it, man. I don't get to do it as much as I used to, because with a baby, a 1-year-old, a 13-year-old, a job, 3 dogs, and then this will be the first episode we're actually talking about it. My wife's we're actually expecting our 3rd child.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I just found out
That's great.
last week, so we don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. We don't know how far along she is, but this is the first time I've actually brought her.
Awesome.
Yeah,
nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. And then the next question we like to do, 2 books that you would recommend any fan of animation or any person in animation should have on their bookshelves. What are those 2 books that Chris would recommend?
So I have to, and I always mention these. I actually put the first of them up on my Instagram just recently. The first one for me is The Art of Walt Disney by Christopher Finch. Big old thick book. Well, the first one, the one that I got, my parents bought it for me back in '79. I was really young. They knew I liked the stuff. I would do this thing where I would it was like a Zen thing almost, where I'd find I would look through this book. This is Art of Walt Disney. It kind of goes just kind of chronologically through the Disney studio. It's tons of pictures, some fold out pages. It has a white cover, and it's a drawing of Mickey Mouse with a paintbrush. The one I had was one of the first editions, had like a clear plastic cover on it that looked kind of like a cell, and that's what had the Art of Walt Disney title on it. But that's since been ripped off the book. I don't know where it is right now, but if you ever see it, big thick one, I would suggest you buy it, especially if you're a Disney fan. That was a real energizer for me when I was young, because I would go through, I'm sure I've memorized every page of that book. And part of that though is at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of animation books out yet.
Yeah.
Now you go to the store, there's tons of animation books.
Mhm.
There wasn't really any at all. And there wasn't like the internet where you could just kind of look up books. You had bookstores. So my parents, I don't know where they found the book. They knew I liked animation, and that was a book about animation. It was thick, it was big. They gave it to me, and I loved it. And there's fold out pages, tons of images from the movies, drawings, stuff in there. I used to meticulously copy them and draw, like I'd spend hours doing it, like a zen out doing this. So that would be my first one.
Mhm.
Our Walt Disney, Christopher Finch, the bigger one. The bigger the better. And then the second one would be the series of books, the Walter Foster books. The animation instruction books by Walter Foster. So Preston Blair did some artwork in a couple of them. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're kind of big. They're almost like bigger than 11 by 17 almost, and they're paperback. They're thin, they're only like a quarter-inch thick, but jam-packed with how to animate stuff. And I will say, everything you need to know about animation is in those books. About how to, well, I'll put it this way, sorry. Everything you need to know about how to animate, everything you need to learn to be a good animator is in those books.
Yeah.
And they're simple, and it's cartoony stuff, and it's from, the 40s, or 40s or 50s, I can't remember. But everything is in there, man. And I found those books later, probably closer to when I was in college, and I went through them and go, wow, you can do, and it shows you, walks and how to flex faces for dialogue, but it's so simply laid out, and it's so clear. And you can just take that information, and then you tweak it for the style that you're animating. I animated like super realistic Disney stuff using the principles I learned in those Walter Foster books.
Mhm.
That's where I learned this stuff. I learned it, and I turned to the animation table and I tried it, and the stuff, that's where I got the kind of the first lessons on how you do this stuff. And the principles that are in there, I still use.
Yeah.
I just tweak them slightly to match the style of what I'm doing. So Walter Foster books, everybody should have those that wants to be an animator. That's, everything you'll need to know is in those books.
Beautiful. And then this one is always fun because it's always interesting to see where we go from it. So this is the animation recommendation. This is where you get to sit there and say, hey, Julian and the What's in My Head crew, you should reach out to such and such and see if you can get them on the show. Is there anybody that you would recommend that you think would have a great time on this show?
Well, there's people I think that should be on your show and should definitely be reached out to talk about animation. Whether they would have a great time on the show, I don't know. Some people just don't like to talk about themselves. But there's the kind of the obvious ones of like guys like James Baxter and those type of dudes. I like James. He's a great guy. Got a lot of information. Tony Ficelli, if you could ever get him to talk for any length of time, he would be great. But then
that James has come up in.
Yeah, he's just a great
I think Andy Bjelk brought him up 2 weeks ago when I had Andy on.
Yeah, these things kind of make me nervous because I'm in a different headspace while I'm talking to you here. So I'll get off the call and go, oh, why didn't I just say him? Why didn't I just say, there's all these people that you forget. But, I'm kind of searching for people that you won't necessarily get. And, if you could get a hold of Bob Jakes or could get a hold of Darley, those be two cool people. Duncan Marjoribanks, there's another. I'm kind of trying to go off the usual suspects course, the guys that are around, geez, I don't know, like
you gave us quite a few names here, man. So
yeah, I mean, I could probably, as they pop into my head, but that's a tough one because I know that there's probably people listening to this go, hey, how come you didn't say me, man? And they're like, I just right now I'll just go, sorry, man, I'm
And then you can say that to
I'm
them.
nervous.
You can say that to them when they come on the show and you see them responding.
You know what? I will say this kind of very quickly at the end that I came to terms with it very early on in my career that I do not do self-promotion very well, and I'm not comfortable with it. And I always felt like I was being disingenuous when I was trying to do it, because you have to do a certain amount of, self-promotion and stuff in your career. You have to kind of toot your own horn, kind of.
Yeah, you have to shuck.
But I was,
well.
yeah, and but I was just very uncomfortable with it. And, so I kind of came to terms with that and say, hey, this is not you, man. Like you're not the schmoozing type. You're just going to have to find another way to let people know who you are. And you're going to have to be okay with a lot of people not knowing who you are. And, and I'm okay with that, Yeah. So, I don't, people, there's a lot of people that get mentioned all the time that get, that, are always the, like I call the usual suspects, because they're really good and people know who they are.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, I'm fairly quiet, I don't go around, like I say, toot my own horn too much, because it's just not me,
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. It's like nobody, nobody says, hey, you should interview Chris. Nah, it's just, yeah, I know. Yeah. Maybe
Cool.
maybe they'll see my name on a credit somewhere.
You've been on my list for quite some time, and I'm glad you came on the show, man.
Well, I'm glad you had me. That's just
this has been a real treat, man. So the first fans question here, we'll get to as many as we can, ladies and gentlemen, but there was quite a few, so we won't be able to get to all of them. But thank you for writing in. For the folks that did. Nikki Hutchinson wants to know, what was the biggest difference in making an animated feature at Disney to Warner Brothers?
Oh, the biggest difference? Well, I'll tell you that, okay, so in my experience, now it would obviously be different with a lot of other people, and I made let's say between Iron Giant and then say working on the couple of times I worked at Disney, there's almost, from in my experience, it was almost polar opposite the way they looked at features. Disney controls every little piece of the thing. They're in this, they want to know what you're doing here, they want to, and I think, you're going through this process where there's multiple levels of approval of everything. And they really, I'm not going to say it's not micromanaging. It's more like they're just aware of everything, and they're controlling everything. It's like, okay, they know what's going on. They know everything, Disney or Warner Brothers is like the opposite. When I worked there, they were like, yeah, okay, go. We'll see you when the film's done. It's like they come in and they look, hey, what are you doing? Hey, how's it going? All right, great. Hey, see you later. They're like, I'm not even sure if they're half the time they were aware of that we were even making a movie.
Did you ever read Chuck Amuck?
Yeah.
So remember that it's a very famous story, and I'm pretty sure Chuck's actually said it quite a few times, but it was one of the Warner brothers. I can't remember. I think maybe Jack Warner. I'm not sure, but he called him Air Warner. The German term for Air Warner. And he goes in there, and he was with Leon Schlesinger. I always pronounce his name wrong, but he was like, he looked at him and Leon. Jack looked at Leon and Chuck, and he was like, we make Mickey Mouse, right? And then before Chuck could say no, and Leon was like, we absolutely do. And he was like, good. So that's what that story reminded me of.
Yeah, that's kind of like, Warner Brothers, and they're both ways work, right? It's because, Disney is on top of everything, but they also promote the crap out of everything. So, the success rate is pretty good. Whereas, Warner Brothers is like, the film's done, and it's like, so what are you working on? It's like, well, we just finished the film. Oh, you finished the film? Like, oh, are we supposed to put it in the theaters or on TV? Oh, it's supposed to go in the theater. Okay, we better figure out how to get this thing into, it's like I'm exaggerating for
Yeah.
humor, but it is kind of like that. It's like, what? Oh, okay, all right. Well, let's figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
They're so. I worked on another kind of a direct to video feature there a couple of years after Iron Giant. It was a Mucha Lucha thing, feature film, and we swore like we delivered them storyboards for the whole film, and it was like a stack. Like I'm gonna say it's a stack about 1.5 feet high of paper storyboards we delivered to the guys and the executives, and we delivered it, and it was like the next day, or wasn't even a day later, they went, yeah, looks great. And we're like, dude, you didn't even look at that. It's like, there's no way. They looked at the stack of paper and they went, there's no way I'm gonna look through all that crap. It's like, yeah, you guys are fine. You're good. Yeah, you're good. All right. It's like, we had a completely different experience than the guys that were doing the Mucha Lucha TV show, who were just being like drilled. They were having a hellish time, and we were on the made to direct-to video movie, and they were like, we just pictured the bunch of guys smoking cigars in a room going, what is that? Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, that's the difference in my experience between Disney and Warner Brothers. You get to Warner Brothers, we had the freedom to do whatever you want, which results in great films like Iron Giant, but the promotion side of it not as good as it could be. On the other side, Disney, looking over everything, you don't have all that freedom, but damn, they can promote it when it's done.
Absolutely, they can, man. The next one's not a question; it's a statement, really. Penis. I apologize.
Edit.
Pinus. That might be that's a Freudian slip, I suppose. Pinus_productions want to say to Chris and all veteran animators and people drawing and animating in the industry, thank you. Coming from a young artist, I'd like to state that y'all truly sank so we can float. Not saying drawing or animating is easy now, but it's 10 times easier now than it was then. Thank you for the inspiration and the motivation you and all creators give to everyone who is and will be impacted by this art form and these stories. Much love, RJ. So you got a fan out there for
wow, that's really cool, man. That's
really nice.
That's really nice to hear. I mean, you kind of don't think about that stuff while you're doing it. You're just kind of living in the moment. But we had guys that we feel the same way about, and you're appreciative of, what they did. So, you kind of like, oh, that's really cool. I'm glad that people are digging the stuff that we did, and it's nice to see, when people are influenced by it. It is really, wow, that's really cool. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm almost speechless from that.
Well,
really cool, man.
Yeah, thank you, RJ, for writing that one in.
Yeah, RJ, cool, man.
Trollatron786 wants to know, I love the Iron Giant. Its message is so different from the movies of that time. How did you feel it was going to change the animated filmscape? So I guess what they're asking is, did you think that this movie was going to change the way animated movies were?
In a word, no. But I do think it's interesting, the observation that the story was so different than other stuff that was out at the time. That I'm stumbling over that a little bit because my brain is working, because I don't think I so agree with that statement. It just never really occurred to me that was the case. And I think it's because we weren't comparing, we were just like, and trying to do something that, like, I don't want to mention names or anything of places, but I'd been at other places where I was kind of like, I looked at the films and I was like, man, they weren't really doing anything for me. And then, we start work on this first Raygun and then Iron Giant, and we go, wow, this is really cool. And so it's not really consciously thinking it's going to change anything or thinking that it's going to do anything. You're just in the moment and you're knowing that you're doing something that you feel is really good. And it's such a great place to be. You're learning, you're inspired, you're energized, and you feel like, man, we're doing something that's, this film I think is going to be really good. That's really good. Everything we see is really good. And you just keep trying to make it as good as you can. And it doesn't really go beyond that. And part of it too, maybe is in the experience of doing these films, is that you don't want to think too far ahead of stuff, because we don't have control over certain things. You know, you don't have control over how the movie is received or anything. And I don't really want to hinge any of my, I don't, you know, I might get disappointed that people didn't see it because I think it's a good film, but I really don't want to hinge my, you know, self-worth or my feelings about it on something I don't have that kind of control over.
Yeah.
You know, what if they don't release the film? You know, it's like you get the whole thing done and they go, man, we're not going to release it. And you're like, you know, I can see how that's devastating for people, and, you know, and you wish people had seen it. But, you know, a film like Iron Giant comes out, it doesn't really do that well when it's first released. So you're disappointed, but you're still going, people just have to see it, man. They'll like it. They'll like it. So no, to answer the kind of the question is, I didn't really think about it changing how animation was done or anything. We didn't really get to that. I was just immersed in having this this kind of artistic, you know, opportunity to do something really good. And then that was it. You know, that was, you know, that was it for me. Enough for me. That was plenty.
Absolutely. Lagamba 25301 wants to know, if you could change any scene, what would it be and why? This is an Iron Giant question. Is there anything you would change about the movie?
Change the movie?
Yeah, is there anything that you would change in the movie if you could? Keep it the same.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would. I mean, nothing comes off the top of my head, and the reaction, the knee-jerk reaction I have is first thinking of the stuff that I did. You know, there's a couple of like, let me just put it this way, because I need to be diplomatic here. There's a sequence of the film that I animated, but I was not able to finish. And because I'm trying to be very diplomatic here, but let's suffice it to say, for reasons not, you know, at the end of the production, they rolled up people off the production, especially ones that were, you know, more expensive. Let's put it that way. And I was not able to be around to finish some of the shots that I had roughed out. And I actually had, me and a couple of other animators, we actually took our rough shots home with us. We did them for free. We completed a bunch of shots, tie down and rough in between and everything for free after we were after we were done on the production. That's how much we wanted to make sure that the animation looked great. But there was a couple of shots in there that I was not able to do. They were finished off by another animator that did a great job, really great job of them. But when I think back about it, I wish that I could have been able to finish those shots off. You know, it doesn't make any difference in the movie, though. The movie, I'm sure people watching the movie probably wouldn't even know the difference if you had the two versions up there. But it was just, for me, like the sense of not being able to finish something I started. That's all.
I can understand that too, man, because you know, just doing anything, I want to see it through till it's done. I don't like when I leave for work, I don't like leaving anything for tomorrow. I want to make sure I come in with a clean slate. And it's the same thing when I'm starting something. I want to finish it all the way through. That way I can say, like, shit, man, we really did that. I did that, you know?
Yeah.
I have that same way of looking at it. Vert Cage wants to know, please ask about the process of combining the 3D animation for the giant with the 2D animation and the challenges that came with it, since it was one of the first movies to combine these two methods. Did anything stick out as far as 3D to 2D? Do you remember?
Couple of things.
Yeah.
Couple of things. So what they did was now, well, I'll get to that in a second. The one of the things that sticks out to me is that what they did was they had once they did the computer animation of the giant, at the beginning they were going to try to do the thing like we do in 2D animation where you use a combination of ones and twos. I'm not sure how much I need to go into what that means, but essentially it means in some hand-drawn animation they do a drawing every second frame, and then sometimes they put a drawing every frame. So every frame, what we call ones, it's very smooth, but it's a lot of work. And they found out early on, if you did it every second frame, it would still look smooth, and you only have to do, you don't have to do as many drawings. But as you get better as a 2D animator, you get to the skill in being able to go back and forth between them, because there's slightly different looks between them. And when you see that really fluid Disney animation, that's what it is. It goes into twos and ones, and it has a nice feel to it. Ones has like a smooth feel for fast action, and twos has like a softer look for slower action, basically. So they tried to do that with the computer animation of the giant. And it didn't work at all. It was like they had a wire, like it looked like a drawing, like a pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Like a wire, not wireframe, but it was like that of the CG animation, but it was the line drawing of the CG animation. But because the CG animation was so perfect, it would stutter whenever it went on twos, because it was so absolutely perfect every drawing. And it just didn't look right. And plus, it wasn't filled in with color. And it's this weird optical thing when something's just a line drawing. In animation, when it's moving on the screen, you don't see the volume. As soon as you fill it in with color, you're not looking at the lines anymore, you're looking at the volume. And so when it's moving, you're seeing a volume moving. When it's just a line drawing, if you picture in your head a line drawing of a circle moving across, you're looking at a circle drawn. If you fill that circle in with black, it looks like a black dot moving across. So the optical thing that happens is when you put it on twos, it kind of has a stuttering feel, like it's shaking, and it looks weird and it looks dumb. So they thought, oh, they had this great idea that they're going to use ones and twos because it fit in, and then they realized we can't do that. But then they realized in the end it was good, because it made the giant move have this feel of like more robotic, and it made it feel more like a robot. And then they made him, over the course of the movie, if you notice, he starts to move less and less as like a robot as the movie goes on,
Humanizing.
Yeah, and that was a very conscious and worked out piece of business. Now, so what we did, it wasn't hard per se. Those line drawings of the computer stuff, they just print them out, peg them up, which means they put the peg holes at the bottom so that we can flip it on the pegboard like a piece of animation, and you would just put your 2D animation over top of that and draw over top of it. It wasn't too complicated. And we've actually done similar things. They'd done actually similar things in other films, like some of the computerized backgrounds. They probably animated it the same way. Like I think of the clock sequence at the end of Great Mouse Detective. Like they had these moving computerized backgrounds that the mouse was crawling over, and that was probably all printed out, and they would just Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that you're printing out stats of the live action. But it's kind of the same thing what they did with the giant. And I think Krista in Fern Gully, her flying sometimes was animated. They tried doing this thing where they animated her as a computer model to get her to fly around, but I think the animators just ended up not using it and using their own animation. But not maybe time consuming, not super difficult. to
Yeah.
do.
Beautiful. And I figure we'll end it with this one. Polar Sparks wanted to know. He said you've I'm sorry if I don't know if it's a he or she, so I apologize. He also directed 11 episodes of My Life as a Teenage Robot. So they're a big My Life as a Teenage Robot fan here. Questions I have, and they knocked out like 4 of them, but we'll end it with this one. Is Chris surprised at the resurgence of the Iron Giant in pop culture? The Giant cameoed in Ready Player One in 2018, and it was among the first wave of characters announced in the new fighting game Multiverses. Does it bother him that the Giant is depicted as a fighter? So, are you surprised at the resurgence of the Giant? We'll start with that.
Surprised? Surprised. I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. What is it when I look at it and go, oh, that's pretty cool. That's what that was the way I reacted. What you call that? I don't know. It was like, I thought that was pretty cool. I don't worry about the depiction of the Giant because the film exists, and the original film exists. People are going to take it and do stuff with it. I've seen like mashup fan art type things for years and years and years, and people doing their own artwork and taking it, and here's the Giant, dressed like this, or here he is as a surfer, or here, and taking it in all different directions because they think it's cool. The film exists, and that's the film. And people will change it. It's like, that's, the Giant is how, to me, the Giant is how he lives in that movie, in the first movie. If people want to do a version of it, then that's a version of it, so that's the way I feel about that. I'm going to just touch really quickly on this thing with My Life as a Teenage Robot, because it was a very cool thing. I'll just very quickly, because you asked it in that thing. It was actually more than 11 episodes that I directed. It was quite a bit more, quite a few. They don't usually line them up in those wikis and stuff. But anybody who gets a chance should watch that show. It's a really cool little show. It had its little moment, and it was really well designed. It had some really cool backgrounds in it. The stories were really fun. The theme song is really great. You ever listen to that theme song? It kicks ass. And it was a ton of fun. And I had come from working at Disney on I'm trying to think, like Atlantis and Home on the Range and stuff like that. And it was getting into kind of a dark time at Disney where people were getting laid off and stuff. And I left and went over to Nickelodeon, and the vibe at Nickelodeon was so fun. Like, people were just happy. It was such a great, like, change of pace for me for that time. And it was such a great time. Rob Renzetti's super talented. All those people that were on there were really great. What a great crew. And just a fun show. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's just a fun show. But then I'll just come back to the kind of like Iron Giant, right? So there's 2 shows, and there's a couple other ones too. But Iron Giant was one of those things where all these things, like a perfect storm of coolness, comes together, and you work with great people. You have a great opportunity. The story's great. Like, not everything was perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It ended up. I'm really touched by how many people were affected by the film. And it really gives me joy that people enjoy that film so much. It makes me feel like, wow, all that hard work, it paid off in some ways. So all that, thinking, wow, we really got to make this good because we got this chance, that you actually sort of succeeded in a little bit, and it gives you that kind of inspiration to go, well, okay, if I ever see that happen again, then I know it pays off. I know this hard work pays off because I've seen it, I've seen it with that film. So yeah, it gives me joy when I hear people talk in these kind of positive ways about Iron Giant, what it meant to them. Yeah, that gives me a lot of joy.
Well, I'm glad, man, because this movie has given me a lot of joy throughout the years. I mean, like I
Cool.
said, this is my favorite animated movie of all time, and for good reasons, man. So, ladies, if you haven't seen it in a while, go back and rewatch it. It holds up, and it will continue to hold up because, like I said, it's perfect. So
It's a good one. It's got, it's positive, and that ending is so great. It
truly
just,
is.
yeah, it's just so satisfying to watch. I'm glad I was glad I was around to be part of it.
Man, me too, man. I'm glad you spent some time with me today. Before we wrap up, man, I know you said you were not the greatest at self-promotion, but this is the part where you get the self. So Chris, man, if people want to come and say, I love what you do, where can they find you? You're on social media at all?
Yeah, mostly it's my Instagram.
Mhm.
That's my name is one word, Chris Sauve, ChrisSauve 25, Instagram. Yeah, go there. That's where I post all my animation stuff, and I do little lesson things. I started it. It used to. I tell this to everybody. I used to just post what everybody else just posts on Instagram, like pictures of me drinking a beer with my brother, or like just. And then one day a friend of mine said, "Hey, you should post some of your animation on there, and you should tell people how you know things about doing animation." I went, "Oh, okay." So it was my, like we were, like you said, it was me kind of, okay, I'm going to try this self-promotion thing in a way that's more comfortable for me.
Yeah.
And I just did it, and people responded to it. And like I make the joke all the time, it's like people seem to like me talking and showing my animation more than pictures of me on a boat drinking a beer. So they liked pictures of my animation more than pictures of me. So I'm
Got to
all
give the
cool with
people what
that.
they want.
Yeah, so that's where they would find all the stuff that's with my animation. I have like Facebook, but that's more for like, I don't really spend that much time on there. I'm Yeah, go to my Instagram, and you can send me a message and say, hey man, how's it going? And if I'm able to, I'll reply and say it's going all right.
Beautiful. And that link will be in the description of this video as well as the description
Cool.
of this podcast, so they can
Oh,
click it
great.
and go, and they can go see what Chris is putting up on Instagram, whether it's a beer, it's a picture, or animation of Dean. So like I said, Chris, this has been a real blast, man. I really appreciate you spending some time with me. He's been Chris. I've been Julian. This has been a What's in My Head podcast, and this has been another piece of your childhood. Good night.
Cheers, guys.
But I saw an interview with Charlie Adler, who's a great voice
Oh,
actor
yes.
and voice acting director, and he just simply said that he used to sing in the car on the way to a session, do whatever he was doing, and then sing on the way back. So that's where, if there was any sort of like preparation technique or something, that's what I would do. I would sing, and for this is totally true for Primal. I have about maybe a 45-minute drive from my apartment to the studio to Cartoon Network, and on that drive, I I sing like 90s rap songs,
Nice.
but in opera voice.
Really?
So it's like
What does Tupac sound like for you?
the east side of the LBC on a mission trying to find Mr. Warren G. And I do that because I know the lyrics to all of them. And this is kind of I when I was in the theater in Seattle, to make my fellow actors laugh, sometimes I would do that in rehearsals. So I resorted to doing that on the way, and also just really just kind of making the effort sounds, but not going full force with them, but just really warming myself up. And sometimes I would make silly Instagram videos. Like if you go on my Instagram, it's at Dooder3, DOODER, the number 3, and scroll down a little bit. You can see videos of me doing weird shit with my voice. And I'm just outside of Cartoon Network about to do Primal.
Yeah.
That's how I'm warming myself up, and I'm getting the motivation to warm myself up by making a silly video.